Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. I hope all of you are fine. Today it is the second last lecture on the physiology of respiration and we are going to study cyanosis, dyspnea, hypercapnia, tachypnea and oxygen therapy. So first we begin with the cyanosis. Cyanosis is derived from the Greek word which means blue. It is defined as the bluish discoloration of the skin and the mucous membranes. This is the definition of cyanosis, that what cyanosis is. It is the bluish discoloration of the skin and mucous membranes. This bluish discoloration of the skin can be seen on the earlobes, it can be seen on the nose, lips, hands, especially the fingers and nails, and the feet. So these are different sides of the body where you can see the bluish discoloration known as cyanosis. The question is, why does cyanosis appear? Cyanosis appear when there is increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the blood. When there is increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin present in the arterial blood or in the superficial capillary or subpapillary venous plexus. So this is very important to remember, that increased deoxygenated hemoglobin is present either in the arterial blood or in the capillary plexuses. And we are not talking about the concentration of deoxygenated hemoglobin present in the venous blood. So the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin present in the venous blood is not important. For the thing which is important for cyanosis, which causes the appearance of cyanosis, is the deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood or in the capillary plexus. Now this cyanosis or the bluish discoloration, it becomes evident when more than 5 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin is deoxygenated. So this is the quantitative amount of hemoglobin which, when will be deoxygenated, it will cause appearance of cyanosis. So I am repeating again, we are discussing that why does cyanosis appear, that is what is the cause of it. So cause of cyanosis is increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood or in the capillary plexus blood, and the amount at which the cyanosis is going to appear is more than 5 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin as deoxygenated hemoglobin. So this is when it will appear. Now remember that this deoxygenated hemoglobin amount, it is an absolute amount. It is an absolute amount, not a relative amount. So whenever more than 5 grams per deciliter of hemoglobin will be deoxygenated, it will cause cyanosis to appear. So it does not depend upon how much total amount of total amount of hemoglobin is present in a person. It can be an average of 15 grams per deciliter, or it can be 13 grams per deciliter, or it can be 17 grams per deciliter. This I am talking about the total amount. So whenever of the total amount of hemoglobin present in an adult, more than 5 grams is deoxygenated, it will cause cyanosis to appear. Cyanosis is of two types. Peripheral cyanosis, which sometimes is also called as local cyanosis or localized cyanosis, while the other type of cyanosis is central cyanosis. So there are two types, peripheral cyanosis also known as localized cyanosis, depending upon its causes, and it can be the central cyanosis. So we are going to discuss both types of cyanosis one by one. So first we are going to talk about the peripheral cyanosis. Peripheral cyanosis occurs due to slowing of blood flow through some part of body. Due to slowing of the blood flow, there is increased extraction of oxygen by the tissues, so that more amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin is present in the capillary blood. It can be seen in the fingers, nails and feet. So I am repeating that peripheral cyanosis occur because of slowing of blood flow, and due to slowing of blood flow there is more extraction of oxygen by the tissues, so more amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin is present in the capillary blood, in the capillary plexus blood. Peripheral cyanosis can be seen in the areas of the body like fingers, nails and feet. Now different causes of peripheral cyanosis include the Raynaud disease. Raynaud disease is a condition in which there is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels in the upper limbs commonly, and due to severe vasoconstriction there is decrease in the blood flow to the distal parts of the limb, and decreased and slowing of blood flow in turn cause cyanosis to appear. Then exposure to severe cold can also cause peripheral cyanosis, and you also might have observed that in winters when it is too cold, our fingers and the nails turn blue. So this is what? This is peripheral cyanosis due to extreme exposure, due to exposure to extreme cold. And the cause for this is the physiological response to cold. That due to exposure to cold, in order to conserve heat, in order to decrease the heat loss from the body, there is cutaneous vasoconstriction. There is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels, due to which there is decreased and slowing of blood flow, which causes the fingers and the nails to turn blue. Then it can be due to arterial or venous obstruction. So arterial or venous obstruction will cause again a decrease in blood flow, and this will cause a localized cyanosis, only affecting the part of the body where there is either arterial or venous obstruction. Then is the cardiac failure. In cardiac failure there is decreased pumping action of the heart because it is weakened, and due to decreased pumping action of the heart, not adequate amount of the blood is pumped throughout the body. Now heart failure is a cause which will result both in peripheral as well as central cyanosis. So I am repeating that cardiac failure, it results both in central and peripheral cyanosis, and this is because of the fact that failing heart is unable to pump adequate amount of blood throughout the body. The other type of cyanosis is central cyanosis. Now central cyanosis, it occurs as a result of increased concentration of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood. When we talked about the peripheral cyanosis, we said that there is increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the capillary plexus blood. So that is usually a localized cause, not affecting the entire body except for the case of cardiac failure. In case of central cyanosis, there is increased deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood, and the areas which are prone to central cyanosis include the lips, tongue and the mucous membrane. Lips, tongues and mucous membrane. Here we can see the central cyanosis. So when there is cyanosis involving the lips, tongue and the mucous membrane, think of the conditions or the diseases resulting in central cyanosis, because these are the areas which are not involved in case of peripheral cyanosis. So if cyanosis is present only in the fingers, nails or in the toes, so you can think of the causes which lead to peripheral cyanosis. But if the cyanosis is seen in the lips, tongue or the mucous membrane, think of the diseases which can lead to central cyanosis. So different causes of central cyanosis include all the conditions resulting in hypoxic hypoxia. All the conditions or the diseases resulting in hypoxic hypoxia cause central cyanosis, and we have studied it in detail in topic of hypoxia. Then presence of right to left shunt can also cause an increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood. When there is a right to left shunt, what happens is that there is mixing of the venous blood, which is deoxygenated blood, with the arterial blood, which is oxygenated blood. So due to mixing up of the deoxygenated blood with the oxygenated blood, this will result in decreased oxygen saturation in the arterial blood, and more of the oxygenated hemoglobin will be seen in the arterial blood. Then is the polycythemia vera. This condition you have studied in association with the topic of blood physiology. Let me briefly revise for you that polycythemia is a condition in which there is increased number of RBCs present in the blood, or increased amount of hemoglobin is present, more than normal. So there are two types of polycythemia. The one is physiological polycythemia, which is also called as secondary polycythemia. The other type is polycythemia vera, which is a pathological condition in which, because of unknown reason, because of overactivity of the bone marrow, there is more production of the blood cells. So there is increased count of red blood cells and there is increased amount of hemoglobin present in the blood. Now when there is more amount of hemoglobin present in the blood, more will be present in deoxygenated form. So in polycythemia vera, when deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood becomes greater than 5 grams per deciliter, cyanosis appears, and it will be seen in the areas of central cyanosis. Now this is the slide showing you the pictures of cyanosis. Here you can see the bluish discoloration of the nails as well as the fingers. So this is peripheral cyanosis, and here you can see the bluish discoloration of the lips and the tongue. So this is the central cyanosis. Now cyanosis is a very important sign of hypoxia, but absence of cyanosis does not rule out hypoxia. I am repeating, this is very important point to remember, that cyanosis is a very important sign of hypoxia, but its absence does not rule out hypoxia. It is because of the fact that not all causes of hypoxia are associated with cyanosis, or we can say that not all the causes or the diseases which result in hypoxia also cause cyanosis to appear. So there are certain cases of hypoxia in which cyanosis will not appear, like carbon monoxide poisoning. We have done it in detail in the chapter of transport of respiratory gases in the blood. So cyanosis does not appear in case of carbon monoxide poisoning. So although the patient is having hypoxia, oxygen deficiency, but the cyanosis does not appear. Then is the case of cyanide poisoning. So in cyanide poisoning, again there is hypoxia, but cyanosis does not occur in case of cyanide poisoning. Similar is the case of the anemic hypoxia. Now the anemic hypoxia, as you must be remembering, is the condition in which there is decreased oxygen, is a type of hypoxia in which there is decreased supply of oxygen to the tissues because of less amount of hemoglobin present in the arterial blood due to different causes. So in anemic hypoxia, there is already a decreased amount of hemoglobin present in the arterial blood, so more than 5 grams cannot be deoxygenated. So in case of anemic hypoxia, there is no cyanosis. So I have told you 3 conditions in which there is hypoxia but there is no cyanosis, and I am repeating those conditions: carbon monoxide poisoning, cyanide poisoning, and the case of anemic hypoxia. So that was about cyanosis. Now we move on to the next topic, which is dyspnea. Now dyspnea is also known as air hunger. Dyspnea is also known as air hunger. It can be defined as the mental anguish associated with inability to ventilate enough to satisfy the demand for the air. In simple words, patients usually describe it as difficulty in breathing or shortness of breath. Difficulty in breathing, shortness of breath, or breathlessness. Under normal circumstances, we are not conscious of our breathing movements. So because breathing is an automatic process occurring without our consciousness, and we are not aware of our breathing movements. But under pathological conditions, breathing may become a conscious act, which means that patient has to make increased breathing efforts, and when the patients have to make increased breathing efforts and it becomes a conscious act, such a person is said to be suffering from dyspnea. And I just told you, patients usually describe it as shortness of breath or breathlessness. Now one thing very important about dyspnea is that it is subjective in nature. It's a feeling, it's a symptom which is described by the patient, and you cannot measure it objectively. Like we have many symptoms and the features of different diseases that we can measure objectively. We can measure them quantitatively. Like fever, if someone complains of having fever, we can measure it quantitatively, that how much fever the subject is having. Similarly, we can measure the blood pressure, we can measure the pulse rate, but dyspnea is a complaint that we cannot measure. So it is said to be subjective in nature, and we can only grade it in its intensity, like mild, moderate or severe dyspnea, but we cannot measure it quantitatively. Now there are 3 factors important to the development of dyspnea. We can say that there are 3 basic causes which can result in dyspnea. The first is hypoxia and hypercapnia. Now any condition, any disease which results in hypoxia, it will cause dyspnea. Similarly, any condition or a disease which results in hypercapnia can also cause dyspnea. Then the second cause of dyspnea is increased work performance by the respiratory muscles. In the first, there is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues, or there is retention of carbon dioxide. Both these factors can contribute to the development of dyspnea. And second is that there is normal or amount of oxygen present in the blood and supplied to the tissues, and there is no retention of carbon dioxide. Okay? Second reason is increased workload on the respiratory muscles. So increased work performance by the respiratory muscles can result in dyspnea, like severe exercise. And during severe exercise, when ventilatory demand for oxygen is increased too much, respiratory muscles have to work very forcefully. So when there is an increased workload on the respiratory muscles, such as during severe exercise, it can also result in a feeling of dyspnea. But here remember, this is a physiological example. This is not a pathology. It's a physiological response or physiological cause. Then the third factor that contributes to the development of dyspnea is the state of mind. When it is due to the abnormal state of the mind or due to the feeling or having a fear of breathlessness, this is called as psychogenic dyspnea. So I can explain it with the example like some people feel breathless when they are present in a crowded place, so they have shortness of breath. So this is called as, this is due to the state of mind, and this is called as psychogenic, because in this case when you are present in a crowded place, if it the patient does not have any pathology, okay? There is no hypoxia, there is no hypercapnia, the workload on the muscles is not increased, but still patient feels shortness of breath. So this is because of the state of mind, and this is called as psychogenic dyspnea. So these are the three factors which contribute to the development of dyspnea, and different diseases or the conditions will cause one of these factors to be present to result in the development of dyspnea. So different causes can be severe exercise, and in severe exercise we know the mechanism, that there is increased workload on the respiratory muscles which can lead to development of dyspnea. At high altitude, there is decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere, and which causes hypoxia, and this is hypoxic hypoxia. So hypoxic hypoxia can lead to dyspnea. Then different respiratory diseases like asthma, pulmonary edema, and many others in which there is associated hypoxia can result in dyspnea. Similarly, in cardiac failures, dyspnea is again an important symptom. And then lastly, the neurogenic or the emotional dyspnea. Now emotional dyspnea occurs because of some, again it is because of the state of mind, and it occurs when there is some disturbing news or the bad news heard by some people. Now next topic is hypercapnia. Now hypercapnia is excess carbon dioxide in the body fluid. Increased concentration of carbon dioxide or increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the body fluids including the arterial blood. Normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arterial blood is 40 mm of mercury. So when it becomes greater than 40 mm of mercury, it is said to hypercapnia. It is said as hypercapnia. Hyper means more, and capnia stands for carbon dioxide. So excess carbon dioxide in the body fluids and increase in partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the body fluids including the blood is known as hypercapnia. Now hypercapnia can occur either due to excess production of carbon dioxide, increased production of carbon dioxide than the amount which can be removed from the lungs, or it can occur when there is retention of carbon dioxide, that is failure to exhale out carbon dioxide, but it is produced in normal amounts. So there are two basic conditions or the causes. One is the conditions associated with increased production of carbon dioxide, and the second one is in which there is normal production of carbon dioxide, but there is retention of carbon dioxide in the body because of some abnormal functioning associated with the respiratory system. So increased production of carbon dioxide can be seen in severe exercise, it's a physiological cause, and it can be seen in fever. This is almost obviously a pathology. So in fever there is increased metabolism, and due to increased metabolism caused by fever, there is more production of carbon dioxide, so it can cause hypercapnia. Then hypercapnia due to retention of carbon dioxide can occur in the conditions or in the diseases where there is hypoventilation. Hypoventilations mean decreased respiratory activity, so that less amount of so that inadequate ventilation of alveoli occurs, inadequate ventilation of the lungs. So hypoventilation can occur because of different reasons, like if there is depression of the respiratory center because of the drugs, narcotics, sedatives, and this can all cause depression of respiratory center, even general anesthetics. So when there is hypoventilation, there can be hypercapnia. Now, what are the effects of hypercapnia on the body? I just told you that normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arterial blood is 40 millimeter of mercury. And in the previous lecture, we talked about the pulmonary functions test, and there we talked about the arterial blood gases. And you must be remembering all the time that when we talk about the partial pressure of oxygen or the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, we are talking about their partial pressures in the arterial blood. So normal partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the arterial blood is 40 millimeter of mercury. When it increases than 40 millimeter of mercury, that is hypercapnia. So when partial pressure of carbon dioxide reaches up to 60 millimeter of mercury, it produces the feeling of dyspnea. अभी हमने किया with the causes of dyspnea के hypercapnia is one of the factor which can contribute to dyspnea. So when partial pressure of carbon dioxide increases to 60 millimeter of mercury, it causes dyspnea or shortness of breath. In the range of 80 to 100 millimeter of mercury, hypercapnia will cause the subject to become lethargic and semi-comatose. And at partial pressure of 120 millimeter of mercury, there is depression of the respiratory center because of too much retention of carbon dioxide, and it can even cause death of the person. So when we talked about the regulation of respiration, there we talked that carbon dioxide is a stimulus for increase in respiratory activity. So when it is mildly increased, it stimulates the respiratory center. But when it is there is a large increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide, a very high concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood, it causes depression of respiratory center, and due to severe depression of respiratory center, the respiratory activity may cease at all, and it can result in death of the person. Now coming to the tachypnea. Tachy means more, increased. Apnea is for breathing. So tachypnea is increased rate of ventilation. Like you have studied that tachycardia is increased rate of heart. So tachypnea is increased rate of ventilation or increased respiratory rate. Increased respiratory rate is called as tachypnea. You may have seen tachypnea you may have observed tachypnea even in yourself. When you have fever, your respiratory rate is increased. So tachypnea is increase in respiratory rate. Then is hyperventilation. Hyperventilation is increase in rate and depth of ventilation. Hyperapnea is also increase in the rate and depth of ventilation. But these two terms are different. Although we many times are using them synonymally, but these are different. So we are going to see what are the difference between the two. Hyperventilation is increased rate and depth of respiration in excess of the demand of pulmonary ventilation. इसका मतलब है कि रेट एंड डेप्थ ऑफ वेंटिलेशन ज़्यादा हो गई है, लेकिन हमें उतनी ज़्यादा की ज़रूरत नहीं थी. It does not match the metabolic demands of the body. This increase, when the increase in the rate and depth of ventilation is not in accordance with the, it is not matching the metabolic demands and it is in excess. This is called as hyperventilation. जितनी हमें ज़रूरत थी उससे ज़्यादा इंक्रीज हो गया in pulmonary ventilation, that is called as hyperventilation. And hyperventilation can result in alkalosis because of too much carbon dioxide can be blown off from the lungs, causing alkalosis. So this type of alkalosis is called as respiratory alkalosis. Hyperapnea is also increased rate and depth of ventilation, but this time the increased rate and depth of ventilation is in accordance to the body metabolism. So it matches the, when pulmonary ventilation matches the increased metabolic demands of the tissues, this is called as hyperapnea. When increased pulmonary ventilation is in excess of the demand of the tissues, this is called as hyperventilation. So this is the basic difference between the two, although by definition both are increase in rate and depth of ventilation. The last topic for today's discussion is oxygen therapy. Now, oxygen therapy is very important and is useful in many conditions and is sometimes life-saving in many situations. And what are those situations or the conditions in which it is very useful and life-saving? Are the conditions which occur secondary to hypoxic hypoxia. So oxygen therapy is very useful in the conditions associated with hypoxemia secondary to hypoxic hypoxia. Hypoxia, already I have told you, but again I am repeating that hypoxemia means decreased oxygen content in the blood. Hypoxia is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues. So hypoxic hypoxia is decreased oxygenation because of decreased oxygenation of the blood because of inadequate exchange due to any reason. It can include the respiratory pathologies, it can include the pathologies affecting the respiratory center. So hypoxemia, decreased oxygen in the blood due to hypoxic hypoxia. In all these conditions, oxygen therapy is very useful and can be life-saving. So in simple words, we can say the indication of oxygen therapy, very important indication, is hypoxic hypoxia. So different conditions can include the narcotic poisoning. Narcotic poisoning will cause depression of respiratory center. Same is with the overdosage of sedatives, general anesthetics, drowning, electrocution, cardiogenic shock, pulmonary edema, going to high altitude. When someone goes to high altitude, there is hypoxia, and if body does not compensate, make compensatory changes to hypoxia at high altitude, patient can have the symptoms of being sick, and in that condition the oxygen therapy is very helpful to cure the patient. Then in case of carbon monoxide poisoning, again oxygen therapy is helpful, especially if it is given under high pressure. Oxygen can be given either by oxygen tent. The patient is placed in an tent and in the surrounding there is a high oxygen content, so this is called as oxygen tent. Oxygen therapy given through oxygen tent. Then oxygen can be given through mask. You all must have seen the administration of oxygen therapy with oxygen by mask and as well as by the intranasal tube. So commonly used methods are the mask and the intranasal tube, in which a tube is placed, the prongs are placed into the nasal cavity, and these are connected to the oxygen cylinder or the source of oxygen. So these are the three ways by which oxygen can be administered. Now oxygen can either be given at normal pressure, at normal barometric pressure, or it can be administered at high barometric pressure. So when oxygen is administered at high barometric pressure, it is called as hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And in certain situations, it is necessary to give hyperbaric oxygen therapy, such as is the case of carbon monoxide poisoning. So in carbon monoxide poisoning, oxygen therapy is very useful, and it is more useful when it is given under high pressure. It is given at high pressure. Similarly, in Caisson's disease, the one we are going to study with the topic of deep sea diving, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is very effective. So there are situations in which oxygen has to be administered at high pressure, and such oxygen therapy is called as hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Otherwise, it is given at normal barometric pressure. So this was about the oxygen therapy, its indications, its methods, and the ways by which it can be administered. So that's all for today's lecture. I hope you understand. Thank you for the listening.